Good morning, welcome back to Football League World TV. It's the start of a new week and it's time, as always, for the Weekend Review Show. I'm your host, George Dagless, and joining me this morning are Ned Holmes and Adam Jones. Ned, how are you getting on?
Yeah, all good, thanks, George. Obviously a fantastic weekend in sort of the EFL and the FA Cup, of course, and some real scalps for the EFL teams.
Yep, some big results to get into this morning. First of all, though, Adam, how are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I'm very pleased actually for Forest and for Borough, especially on live TV as well. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this and kind of analyse what's been going on.
Yeah, plenty to get stuck into from the weekend. People, wherever you watch from, let us know what you made of the action across the FA Cup and EFL over the weekend. Let us know if you're at a game as well. We're across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter for the next 20 or so minutes, and we are live. Let's get straight into the action though. And really, there can probably be only one place to start, and that is Bournemouth's loss at home to Boreham Wood in the FA Cup yesterday evening. I must admit, I was splitting between that one and the Africa Cup of Nations final. So it was certainly an interesting juggling act for myself. Ned, Parker Ball was getting slammed on social media before, well, not before really, but during and after in particular this game. Over 80% possession for the Cherries, but they couldn't really do too much with it. Some chances, but Boreham Wood never really looked under that much threat, did they? And I think that's why Bournemouth fans are rightly so upset this morning and were yesterday evening as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're bang on there. Obviously, you'd probably say Bournemouth controlled the game without really, bar perhaps that Billings chance and the double save that the Boreham Wood keeper made. You know, certainly didn't test them as much as you'd say that the squad and the lineup, if you consider the likes of, Nat Phillips and Todd Cantwell to, I think up until their moves in January, fairly established Premier League players involved in, and I couldn't really break through. I think for me, it looked at a Bournemouth team. I was left sort of questioning where are the on-field leaders really? That Boreham Wood simply just looked like they wanted it a lot more, and Bournemouth felt like they were sort of really struggling to get out, into top gear, and a really disappointing defeat. I think that's just 2 wins now in 2022 for Bournemouth. One against Barnsley, the worst team in the Championship, and one against non-league Yeovil Town in the last round of the competition. So huge amounts of pressure on Parker, not least after those sort of 5 big signings came on the last day of the window.
Adam, what did you make of Bournemouth's display? There was a few Fulham fans, as perhaps to be expected, jumping in on the comments after the result saying, well, we did tell you about Scott Parker that, eventually things get overplayed and, the way he kind of gets lost a little bit. It's probably premature to be saying that right now. Bournemouth is still in a good position in the Championship, but, it's got to be a concerning result, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Scott Parker needed to adapt a little bit more. I know that he likes to pass it out from the back and what have you, but you're looking at the starting back 3 there, including the goalkeeper and the centre backs, and they're all kind of January signings really. James Hill, Nat Phillips, and Freddie Woodman, and they nearly got caught out really early on in the first half with a sloppy kind of pass back out from Woodman. So I think that the players need to take a little bit of responsibility. Obviously, they're against a non-league side; they're expecting to win, and as Ned says, there needs to be a more leaders on the pitch, shall we say? But in terms of the setup, I know that Parker goes forensically in detail on opposition teams, but I think he needed to focus a little bit more on his own team in terms of playing out from the back, because those 3 signings inevitably are going to be nervous. I think that the expectation that they were going to win and that they were expected to win kind of puts a little bit more pressure really on those new boys. So I think the problem wasn't just in the final third, but also in the back third. But looking towards the forward part of it, I think they didn't have too many chances. But the chance that they did have, especially Billings with the 1-on-1, I think he should have done a little bit better on. And I think they were reliant actually on those substitutions in the second half to kind of come on and make an impact. So it's a real disappointment, especially for those who started. But the ones that came on and made an impact can take just a little bit of credit from the game.
Yeah, we have to give Boreham Wood plenty of credit as well. Obviously, can't not mention them. their treat, if you like, is a trip to Everton in the 5th round. They'll be looking to cause an even bigger upset by winning at Goodison Park. Just before we move away from Bournemouth as well, Jimmy Wright's got in touch on YouTube. Parker bought a new team because he has lost the dressing room. An interesting argument being put forward there. Bournemouth fans will be hoping that that isn't the case, but certainly the Cherries need to bounce back from that result as quickly as possible. Up next, another big result for a Championship side, but this time a positive one. Nottingham Forest beating Leicester City 4-1. Really blitzed the FA Cup holders, did the Reds, at the City Ground. A great result for Steve Cooper's men. Adam, let's come to you first of all on this one. How impressed were you just with the general performance from the home side?
I think Martin Keown said this on commentary, but it was a Premier League performance. You could argue that Leicester made them look a little bit good, but just some of the individual performances there. I mean, the team performance in itself was good enough, but some of those individual displays, including Zinchenko, I thought didn't get enough credit from pundits after the match. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, especially getting that first goal as well, and just the overall play really, and the link up for the 4th goal with Jed Spence. Spence himself was fantastic alongside Brennan Johnson down that right hand side. I think they'll be absolutely crucial really in their quest for promotion. That right hand side is looking very good and very threatening at this moment in time. And not only was he good going forward, Jed Spence, he was good going backwards as well. And James Garner, as many people mentioned after the match, looked classy in centre midfield, and I think that'll be promising for Manchester United because against the Premier League side, he didn't look out of place. I want to highlight Keenan Davis' performance as well, and a particular moment where, for the first goal, where he knocked it down for Zinchenko, he showed immense strength there, and in the absence of Lewis Grabban, that's going to be extremely important. And I mean, the only downside of it really was the Bryce Samba error, which was a moment of madness really, and hopefully he can bounce back from that. But apart from that, I mean, the back three of Borrell, McKenna and Cook is absolutely perfect, and we knew that before. But they stood up well to the challenge, and I really do back them for promotion now after that performance. I'm really, it was really promising.
I mean, Adam, you're kind of reflecting perhaps how Forest fans have been about it, that yes, they were sort of buying into what Steve Cooper has been doing, but this result at the weekend seems to be giving them an extra level of belief. Ned, what do you make of the job Cooper's done? He's obviously won a lot of praise already for the work that he's put in there since arriving, but as I was mentioned, this result seems to put everything else he's done so far kind of pales in insignificance. Really, this is such a potentially watershed moment for Cooper's time at Forest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in my eyes, anyway, of the Forest fans I've spoken to, perhaps a bit too much was being made about this being sort of an East Midlands derby. I don't think Forest fans particularly will feel like Leicester are a huge sort of fierce rivalry, given most of their focus is obviously spent on Derby County. But I actually think it speaks volumes to what Cooper's done, that I think there was a quiet confidence among many fans heading to the City Ground. There wasn't a huge surprise, I think, among many supporters that they saw their team sort of take apart at what expose the fragilities in what has been a fairly fragile Leicester City team at times this season. But yeah, I mean, Steve Cooper is perhaps easy to forget. A lot of the time Forest were bottom of the table when he came in, and obviously now 5th round of the FA Cup, huge 2 Premier League scalps already, pushing for one of those promotion places, and obviously Cooper's record in the Championship so far is 2 seasons in management, made the playoffs both times, playoff final once, and Forest will obviously hope that bodes really well moving forward. And as you say, I think such a good feeling now at the City Ground. I think that there's a real belief that even if it doesn't come this year, that something amazing is sort of brewing there. And I think, Adam touched upon some really top performances. Joe Worrell, his return, absolutely massive, I think, and a surprise to see him back so soon. And not sure which header was better, really, the diving header to score the goal, or that one sort of John Terry-esque along the floor to win a goal kick right at the end. But I think that sort of that really summed up the Forest performance, giving absolutely everything and just being, much the better side and certainly deserving of a 4-1 win.
Certainly a fantastic performance from Forest. Jimmy Wright again on YouTube. Forest just wanted it more. And Steve Cooper is a Premier League level manager. The way Forest are going, you never know. He could be a Premier League manager with them next season. It was certainly a great result for Forest and thoroughly deserved too. One more FA Cup game to talk about this morning. That's Middlesbrough's win on penalties at Old Trafford on Friday night. Jadon Sancho put Manchester United ahead before Matt Crooks pegged them back in the second half, and it was an 8-7 win for the Borough on penalties. Ned, let's come to you first of all. How impressed were you with the way Middlesbrough went about their business at Old Trafford? They looked completely unoverawed, if that's even a word this morning.
Yeah, I think that was the big part of it. Really, I think it showed the sort of fight that's been instilled in this Borough squad since Chris Wilder's arrival, and it showed really that they're not afraid of anyone. I think they had to ride their luck, and United, I think, must have had like 5 or 6 chances to make it 2-0, and I think you could sort of argue on another day that Duncan Watmore handball gets given, but you know that they weathered the storm, kept within touch, and then sort of capitalised later on in the game. And actually, I think a real positive for me from Borough's perspective was that even though you look at the sort of quality on Manchester United's bench, and it's the sort of bench that, you know, most clubs in the world would be happy with, and yet it was Wilder's substitutions that seemed to really make the impact. Duncan Watmore, obviously, he looked a real nuisance for that United backline, and I thought Martin Pereiro just added some real energy to midfield, and that was vital. And I think that sort of the depth that it's shown there, even though perhaps following Balogun and Aaron Connolly still look like that they need to sort of build those relationships with players. I think the depth in that Borough squad bodes really well for them. On top of, as you touched upon, that lack of fear.
A really good performance from Middlesbrough, it has to be said. Adam, we've spoken there about Steve Cooper, how good a job he's done, but Chris Wilder probably deserves just as much credit, doesn't he?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, he's come in, he's put in a very well-defined system in there. Everyone knows what they're doing. And also it's allowed Asai Jones to thrive in that kind of wing-back role. I've been very impressed with him, and I was impressed with him again at Old Trafford. And, I was impressed actually with Manchester United's intensity, but, Middlesbrough seemed to deal with that quite well. They were unlucky to concede a penalty. It was a kind of a slip, really. But they, as Ned said, they stayed in touch, and that's the most important thing. And credit has to go to Wilder for that game plan. He seems to have them playing to their full potential at the moment, and I think that's kind of emphasised really by Matt Crooks kind of getting in the right position at the right time to score that goal. I think they've got to utilise and fully utilise his goal scoring ability, because he's definitely got a few goals in him, and he showed that against United. So he's getting the very best out of his players at the moment. I think, as Ned says, I think the forward line kind of needs a little bit more work, but I thought they were very good overall. I think Joe Lumley, I think it might be an area that Chris Wilder might want to target in the summer. I think he looked a bit shaky, and there hasn't been the greatest kind of competition in the goalkeeping department really, in terms of very high quality. I know that Daniels has come in, but Lumley's kind of got his place now. Maybe that's a fault of Wilder's for not addressing it, but that's the only fault really that I can have of him at the moment, because I think he's been outstanding since he's come in and really made them a promotion contender.
Okay, good result for the Borough on Friday night. They're moving into the next round of the FA Cup. Time to move away from the fourth round action at the weekend and move into the Sky Bet Championship. Only a handful of games that are played in the second tier, but still some eye-catching results. We're going to start with Preston North End's win away at Hull City. And the simple question really for both of you guys, I think, has to be is, are Preston North End now playoff contenders? They've played more games than those above them in the top 6 race, but they're only 4 points outside the playoffs. And there's always that old adage where you have to say points on the board are more important than games in hand. Adam, let's come to you first of all. I've got a happy knack of picking up results since Ryan Lowe's come in. You see Preston get involved in the top 6 race?
In the race, yes, I can see that. I mean, I think they're kind of building momentum at just the right time. I think if they'd started too early, they would have fallen off, and I think that's what happened really to Swansea City and Russell Martin, and that could still happen to Preston. But I think at the business end of the season now, they're building momentum at just the right time. But I think they might just miss the boat for the top six. I don't think it's because of them, because since Ryan Lowe's come in, they've been fantastic. I think it's just the likes of Middlesbrough and Nottingham Forest, that showed in the FA Cup that they're both real forces. Blackburn Rovers and Bournemouth, you'd say, are fighting for the automatic promotion spots. That's kind of the third kind of spots, sorted. And then you've got, likes of QPR and Sheffield United as well that are real contenders to get in there. So I wouldn't say that they're kind of a favourite to get in there, and I can't see them being in the top six, but they'll definitely give it kind of a good go. And if they can finish 8th or 9th, then they can take that into next season as a really promising sign of things to come. But in terms of the top six, I think they could definitely be aiming for it in the next few years, perhaps. But this year, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they have the strength in their squad just yet, and they're still adapting to Ryan Lowe as well. So I would say probably not this year in terms of getting top six, but they'll certainly be in the race. And I back them to go on and do good things in the coming years.
It could be a good way of looking at it, Adam. How do you assess it, Ned? Preston in the top six this season, potential? Maybe this is more of a building block year for the campaigns to come.
I think I agree with Adam in the sense that there's certainly stronger teams in that top six race, and particularly with. I think Fulham are probably cut loose now at the top. They'll be going up, but then there's some really strong teams battling for that second sort of spot and in the top six. But I do think it's important not to write them off because while they haven't been the most convincing, that there's some real building blocks there. Sort of make a late push, that resolute defence that Rhino's got going. A really good goalkeeper in Daniel Iverson. I think Ben Whiteman controls that midfield from a deeper role really well, and it's a really structured midfield, which makes them really hard to beat. I was in the press conference with Rhino last week after the Millwall draw, and he made it clear what they do away from home, which is they're off looking first to secure just the 1 point, and then if they can get anything more than that, they obviously only a point against Millwall, missed a penalty then, and then obviously in Emil Rees and Cameron Archer, two really busy strikers, looks like two great goal scorers, and Archer, a shout out to what was a fantastic performance I thought for him. So I think they've got all the building blocks there to make a late push. I do still think you'd certainly consider themselves definitely outsiders, but not to be written off, I think. And just one more sort of on this match, I think a shout out to both goalkeepers, Iverson and Dan Grimshaw. So absolutely ridiculous saves in there to keep out from both sides, and I think that but that's key for both teams. But if we're talking Preston's top six and the fact that they're not going to be a better side on paper than a lot of their top six rivals, so they're going to need their goalkeeper and their defence and that sort of structured midfield to really be key.
Okay, one other Sky Bet Championship game to talk about this morning. That's Blackburn's defeat away at Swansea. With Fulham and Bournemouth in FA Cup action, there's obviously an opportunity for Rovers to try and put a little bit more pressure on those two in the automatic promotion race and get 3 points for themselves. But Michael Obafemi's goal is what gave the Swans the victory on the day. Ben Brereton Diaz did come on from the bench but couldn't have an impact. Obviously only returned from international duty earlier last week, having represented Chile once again. Adam, let's come to you first of all. Missed opportunity for Blackburn.
Massively, and it was a game of missed opportunities for them as well in kind of at the Swansea.com stadium. I think it's a very strange one because I think Darragh Lenihan was probably one of their biggest attacking threats with a couple of efforts on goal. But he had two, quite good chances that perhaps he should have stuck away. John Buckley as well, I have to call out really because he missed an absolute sitter there. Really, he's been fantastic this season. Hopefully that's just a blip for him really. But yeah, it is a massive missed opportunity. Obviously, Bournemouth have got game in hand over them as well, but they look shaky at the moment, as we mentioned earlier. Scott Parker's side, so it was a real opportunity really to put pressure on them and to kind of make them come out, make the cherries come out and try and get some wins on the board. So yeah, I see this as a real massive kind of missed opportunity. But at the same time, I do think the best decision that Mowbray made was not to start Brereton Diaz. I think he only landed in the UK on Thursday morning. So to put him in and risk an injury that could derail their whole season. So for me, that was a good decision. I think they'll be delighted to see Joe Rothwell in as well. So that's another good point for them. So it's not all doom and gloom for them, but they'll be disappointed not to have been more clinical. And it did look as though they were missing Brereton, and that's something that Mowbray will need to be working on after it was kind of highlighted really in South Wales. So that's one thing really that they've got to work on, because the chance creation, it wasn't lacking. It was just the finishing the opportunities, and they needed to finish at least 2 or 3 of those.
Two January signs that made their debuts, Ned, were Ryan Giles and Ryan Hedges. Giles in particular seems to impress Rovers fans, judging by the reaction on social media. But I guess there's going to take a little bit of time for those two, and Brereton Diaz as well, once he obviously gets back up to speed after his international call-up. They've got to gel, haven't they, and find a bit of rhythm. They've got to find that understand with one another. Yeah,
I mean, I think it will be quicker for Ryan Giles, and I think we saw that against we saw that in the game against Swansea. I mean, he was I thought it was remarkable how quickly he seemed to pick things up, some fantastic deliveries into the box. But I guess that's what we've come to sort of expect from him. I think it was 4 key passes he made in the game, which is a hugely impressive stat. And as I say, I think it's going to be easier for him really, because obviously he'll need to be able to sort of work with the players around him, but putting dangerous balls into the box is really his bread and butter. And with Brereton Diaz returning, there's going to be someone that can get sort of on the end of them. So I think that's certainly a real positive for them. But as we discussed, a missed opportunity. First of all with Bournemouth and Fulham playing in the FA Cup, and secondly with that red card for Ryan Manning. I think Swansea can have no complaints there. I think it could have been a straight red. Luckily, it was, I think, just a second yellow. But yeah, very disappointing for Tony Mowbray's side and for them about certainly like how they respond now. I think they've lost the sort of impetus in the fact that it's sort of back in Bournemouth's hands now, in terms of they've got those 2 games in hand. But as we've talked about sort of at the top of the show, Bournemouth not exactly in a perfect position. So Blackburn just need to keep sort of continuing to apply the pressure.
Okay, 2 more games to talk about on the weekend review, and we dip into League One next. And we're talking Sunderland's surprise defeat, I think has to be said, at home to Doncaster Rovers. Ned, let's come to you first of all. Worrying times for Sunderland, really. Obviously, heavily defeated by Bolton last time out. Lee Johnson's lost his job since. We're waiting to see who the next manager's going to be. It sounds like it could quite possibly be Roy Keane, but whoever it is has probably realised that there's quite a job on actually at Sunderland, despite their sort of league position at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was expecting a huge response from the players, not least because of that 6-0 win, but I think it was 38,000 people in the Stadium of Light for the game, their biggest sort of home crowd of the season. And obviously with Roy Keane or whoever it is about to come in, the players are going to want to sort of showcase their qualities. But just a really, really disappointing display, and an apology from me for anyone who watched the betting show and backed my banker, which was Sunderland and over 2.5 goals. We got more than 2.5 goals, but I wasn't sort of expecting to see 2 of them come from Doncaster. But before I go in sort of deeper on Sunderland, I think a huge amount of credit for Doncaster. A lot of people, this was always going to be a difficult run for them. I think they're playing, since that win against MK Dons, are playing sort of 5 of the top 10 teams in League One, and a 5-0 win, of course, to Rotherham after sort of going ahead against Plymouth and being beaten 3-1. I think a lot of people might have sort of counted them out at that point, but a massive result for them. But yeah, you can understand why a lot of Sunderland fans feel sort of the lowest that they felt all season now, even though they're sort of still within touching distance. Getting into that top 2 looks a real hard task, and any manager's going to need to have a near instant impact, really, and that looks difficult with this squad, as we saw, on Saturday. Wigan, I think that they're 2 points back from them, but Wigan have got 4 games in hand, and then they're 8 back from Rotherham, who've got 1 game in hand. So you wonder whether it's going to be another season in the playoffs for Sunderland, and there's been so many sort of nightmarish moments for them in the League One playoffs over the last few years that won't fill many Sunderland fans with much hope.
No, I think that's fair to say, Ned. They'll probably be having a few sleepless nights at the moment, dreading those playoffs once again, potentially at the end of the season. As for Doncaster, Adam, as mentioned, as Ned mentioned there, they're in the midst of quite a tough run. Obviously, lost 5-0 at home to Rotherham, midweek last week. So a great response from them. It helps them stay in touch with those sides around them in the relegation zone. Obviously, there's a bit of a gap to the teams outside the top four, but it gives Donny a bit of hope and something potentially to build on.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've got to give them massive credit as Ned has because they capitalised on their moments and they even hit the post as well. So for them, they could have even been 3-0 up at some point. They, mostly, as I said, capitalised on their chances, played with a bit of freedom as well, and no real pressure. And I guess no one is really kind of expecting them to stay up at this stage. So maybe that kind of works in their advantage that they can play with that bit of freedom in there. Obviously, they had to ride their luck at times, because Sunderland, dominated the game. But still, I mean, I think that was a massive performance, really, from a side that are so far down the table against a team like Sunderland, with the home crowd behind them as well. I thought that was a brilliant performance from them. Are they going to stay up? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure, if it's a bit too much now, a bit too much of a gap to make up, but they've still got a considerable number of games, and if they can pick up some some promising results against some of the big teams, and that might give them a bit of encouragement, kind of going up against the lesser teams. I guess it kind of works in the way that you perform poorly against the lesser teams and then you do well against the bigger teams. That's the way football goes sometimes, but they've got to make sure now, if they want to survive, that they're putting in the maximum performance levels against all teams, and that will be required in the end, and that will be the difference between survival and relegation.
Okay, one final game to talk about on the weekend review show, and that sees us go right to the Football League. Scunthorpe United hosted Oldham at the bottom of League Two. It was an opportunity for both to try and spark what would be one of the great escapes we've seen in the Football League. It was Oldham that won out, Junior Luamba getting the goal under 10 minutes from time. Ned, let's come to you first of all. Let's talk Oldham. Can they get themselves out of trouble? You look at the league table, game in hand on the likes of Carlisle and Walsall, who are just above them. Walsall are in free fall at the moment. Carlisle aren't doing much better either. Oldham have actually shown a bit more form than those two sides. Still a bit of a points gap, but a game in hand, you never know, the Latties could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just key that they use, I think almost it coming as a late winner could be really vital. It's about sort of harnessing that now, and that momentum's built from that, rather than, if they'd have scored early and sort of ground out a 1-0 win, it would have been big, but that late winner really seems to sort of, like, it could be that sort of spark, that match to really get things going. I think certainly a game that seems to be lacking in a fair bit of quality, but you've got to give sort of Oldham their credit for sticking out. Obviously, Junior Luamba sort of forcing that goal in after coming off the bench, and obviously you don't condone fans coming onto the pitch or anything like that, particularly after what we saw at the City ground, but after the roller coaster ride that Oldham's fans have had this season, and how tough it's been with all the off field stuff, you've got to love to see those sort of celebrations in a game like that, and it does make you hope that historic club like Oldham can sort of turn things around, and as you say, the points gap's there, but a game in hand and still time, certainly, if they can make the most of this.
Certainly nice to see Oldham fans on the pitch for the right reasons as well, given some of the protests they've had to make earlier this season, which is obviously understandable as well. Adam, as for Scunthorpe, it's really hard to make a case for them remaining in the Football League now, isn't it? Played more games than most of the sides above them. Form is definitely not there. Losing not for fun, but they're losing a lot. And you've got a pretty poor points tally, haven't they? It's really hard to try and see the iron getting out of this now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you say it's for fun. It's almost like a hobby now because they just keep on losing and they can't seem to buy a point at the moment. And for me, I think they required a win. I think against Oldham, but I think even a point would have kind of set them up okay for the next game. But they just that will prove, I think, that late goal to be just as much of a psychological blow than it will in terms of the table standings, to be honest with you, because it must have been a real sucker punch for them. I mean, you could kind of say they're they kind of brought it on themselves, really. I think they struggled really to defend a few set pieces, which they kind of need to work on. Credit to kind of Oldham for that, for making the most of them, because they looked a real threat in there. But Scunthorpe have also got to take a bit of accountability for the defending in there. But as I said, a point would have been ideal for them, and 3 points. But I think they're lost now. I think it could end up at the end of the season. I think you could look at this game as one where you thought, this was the afternoon really that they got relegated. Obviously it's not impossible. They could still make up the deficit, and as you said, Wolves are in terrible form as well at the moment. So that would kind of give them a little bit of hope. But at the moment, it's looking as though, they'll be competing in the National League next season. And, it would take quite a big bounce, I think, for them to come back now. Unfortunately for them, I think they're looking destined really for the fifth tier.
Yeah, certainly looking pretty tough for Scunthorpe now. But Oldham, a big result for them. They'll be looking to build on that in the weeks ahead. That brings the week in review to a close this morning. One other show coming up on Football League on TV. That's this afternoon, 2:30 p.m. The debate was West Brom appointing Steve Bruce a good or bad decision. Obviously, he's arrived at the Hawthorns with a task of trying to get the Baggies back into the Premier League. But from myself, Ned and Adam, it's pretty much time to go. Just before we do, a little plug for Football League World TV on YouTube. Do subscribe to the channel and do like this video as well if you can. That would be greatly appreciated. But Ned, Adam, great to join you this morning. Thanks for your thoughts on FA Cup and EFL fixtures over the weekend, and people at home will speak to you very soon.